It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACH show that tries to put the entire gender spectrum on one single table. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'll be your host, Christy Powell. Joining me, of course, is V. La Bianca.
Hello, everybody.
And eagle-eyed longtime viewers may recognize Lex Keaton. Joining us tonight is Lex and their partner Beav from the Oh, I Am Queer podcast. Thank you all so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank y'all so much for joining us tonight. Want to let you know that phones are already open. We're excited to hear from you. We're at 512-686-0279. That's 512-686-0279. We're going to be talking about the Oh, I Am Queer podcast and everything that covers, issues of gender and sexuality, as well as ableism and different types of relationships. Have I covered it all? Is that what y'all do?
For the most part, yeah.
For the most part, okay.
Yeah, I would say that's a good summary.
That's a good summary. Okay, well, we're excited to get into it and hear more. We're also really looking forward to y'all joining us. So please pick up the phone, give us an email, jump on the chat, be on the Discord. We love to hear from you, and we're excited to have this conversation tonight. So I've said it enough times tonight. I had to practice, as y'all saw before the show. Oh, I am queer. Oh, I am queer.
Oh, I am queer.
Oh, I am
Yes.
queer. Got it.
Yep.
What is it? I mean, I kind of threw out some just random hodgepodge of adjectives, but what is this podcast and why is it, I guess?
Well, OI stands for Lex's bone disease, osteogenesis imperfecta. We're both genderqueer individuals that are basically having conversations, trying to hold ourselves accountable and try to perpetuate what I just found out about was call-in culture, kind of a less disruptive and disposable way of holding ourselves accountable. So we're not calling people out, we're not canceling anybody, we're showing that we are also people that have a lot of learning to do and make a lot of mistakes when it comes to gender, race, ableism, just kind of everything and more.
That is a brave thing to do on the internet.
Right.
Because, as you mentioned, people are often very quick to point out your mistakes. And actually, we're going to get into some of those a little bit later. But I think it's an important value to have that we can be talking about these things and working on them, because the goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to continue to be improving. And a lot of this stuff may be new to us. It's not new to the world, but in so many ways it is new to the culture.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're as a couple, like, we're excited to kind of talk about this, because as important it is to, like, ask people what their pronouns are and then also use those pronouns. We went on a vacation recently and Beav accidentally called me he in front of their parents, and it was, like, hilarious. But honestly,
I don't know where it came from.
we had margaritas. And
Okay. Yeah, right.
thank you, tequila. So it was, but those are also, like, the funny things. Like, you have to enjoy and laugh at the things, like, while you're working and trying to improve yourself. You also have to laugh at some of this stuff. Like, it doesn't all have to be super serious. And it's a learning experience. Like, we're all learning.
Yeah, there's a perfectionism that I think there's a whole generation of people kind of striving for it and expecting it for themselves and for others. And it's a relief to kind of be human together and laugh about our blunders, because even though we're queer and we're both genderqueer as well as sexually, like, it's funny when we mess up.
Yeah,
and it's important to see.
Right, and also activists, I would say. I mean, you're very active in perpetuating these ideas, and so just recognizing that you can not only mess up, but mess up on a recording that exists on the internet forever.
Yeah, and I think part of why we wanted to do the podcast was as someone who does have a physical disability and who's grown up primarily around able-bodied folks, through our like personal conversations, we just kind of realized, well, in 2019, everyone's starting a podcast. We could too, and we can talk about the intersections of people that are queer and disabled, and also wanted to incorporate folks that are not white like us to kind of shine light on that intersection as well. So it's honestly, like, selfishly, I really wanted to do this because there was such a online presence of people who had OI or who do have OI and are also queer. And so it was one of those things where I was like, I had no idea that there was a whole community of people. And that was something I selfishly wanted to tap into, but at the same time, kind of bridge this gap of able-bodied folks, and especially like within the queer community.
Yeah, I mean, there's an intersection just right there in your own relationship, which is on display right there on the podcast. You know, we talk about how important representation is and these sort of like big ideas of wanting to see different types of people out there, but why is it specifically important to feel connected to that community and to represent it, but also form like a tent pole? Why does that matter for you?
So to be super transparent, one of the things I found myself doing without even realizing it, like until years later, when I moved to Austin, I really was focused on the queer community and really just wanting people to know I was queer, because you do kind of go through this whole like out phase of having to constantly tell everyone. And I just wanted people to know. So I really just kind of honed in and like focused, like, I want people to know I'm queer. But then, you know, kind of fast forward a couple years later, I was like realizing, wait a minute, all these people I've been friends with for 3, 4, 5, 6 years have no idea I have like a physical disability, or if they do, it's this small fraction of me, and I actually suffer through, you know, chronic pain every day, and there's a lot of things that my day-to-day friends may not know about. So then I found myself like going, oh, I'm disabled, I have a bone disease, I grew up in a wheelchair, you know, like I'm almost like overcompensating, or like it kind of felt like it, even though it didn't necessarily seem that way. It was just, I was finding myself like every couple of years I would have to like shine spotlight on it, and it's rather like, why can't I just talk about all of this, because there's so much of it that overlaps. And essentially this is like, the podcast kind of gave us a platform to put all those thoughts and stories together.
Yeah, and I think it's so important too, because, you know, as we talked about being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to make mistakes out there, the coming out process, if we want to label it that way, for these different parts of your identity is rife with that, because people are sort of expected to come out and tell somebody, I'm gay, I'm queer, when they might later realize I'm not gay. Maybe I'm bi or pan. Maybe I'm not genderqueer. Maybe I feel that I better identify as trans or as NB or as these different adjectives, which have a lot of overlap, but we are still kind of like poking at the edges. There's no blood test we can take to find out who we are. And so when we start to have these inklings of it, we want to share that with the world and be proud. But pride tends to come attached with it, this idea of being like perfected or complete or ready to go.
Yeah.
Completed. I like that. Completed.
On the other end, too, it's a lot of people are like, oh, I don't really see you as like someone who's disabled. And it's because they haven't seen me like in physical pain, or they haven't seen me like in a wheelchair or need a mobility aid.
How could you be disabled? You've done so much.
Yeah, I ride a bicycle pretty consistently, and people like really just don't understand that, but it's super low impact. I always kind of tell people like I traded in a wheelchair for a bicycle, and it's looks different, but it keeps my lower half of my body moving. You know, it's super different, and it's conversations I've had people have with me, and I feel like, you know, it's like I've been told this and I've understood or learned from, and kind of trying to put that like in my own words. But
it feels like there's kind of an intersection there of almost like purity culture, in terms of you have to be queer enough or disabled enough to be valid in that community.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's
Yeah, how can you have a podcast as a disabled person if you're not in a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Right,
isn't there like a bar or a level of disabilityness that had to be appropriate? It's ridiculous, but these are all assumptions that I think, speaking at least for myself, I've carried at various points in my life and that I'm having to constantly check and challenge. So
Yeah.
I think that's exciting about the work that y'all are doing in that, I forget the way you framed it, not calling people out, but doing what?
Call in culture.
Call in, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a term coined by, I'm going to brutalize their name, Ngoc Lon Tan. Is a writer that actually coined the term call in culture. And it's a whole philosophy of just not being as disposable with your criticisms of humanity. And to go back on, the margins of disability, it's one of the biggest margins we've talked about a lot because a lot of us, most of us, will eventually become disabled in some way or another as we age.
Fair to say.
So it's one of the biggest intersections, I think, of queerness, of identity, of anything like that, because whether or not we believe it or not, it's a reality that we might all become, in some way or another, experience a disability.
Yeah.
Fair to say.
know.
I feel like that kind of ties back into the concept of representation, because the representation for both the queer community and the disabled community are so shitty, and the only people we see are people who are like, I am just gay, or I am disabled in this very stereotypical way, this way that is very visually or I don't know. I feel like the way that we are presenting people in those groups in media is kind of stymieing the conversation a little bit, because people who are not part of those groups, or maybe even people in them, are looking at other people and comparing them to these very black and white kind of binary concepts of, okay, well, this is gay, this is not, this is disabled, this isn't.
There's absolutely a binary to the disability.
Yeah,
spectrum as well.
and as I'm like hearing y'all talk, I mean, all of it's super valid, but then I have this whole other like layer where my mind is going of even just accessibility. Having a disability could look different. One of our Instagram followers posted something and essentially just was like, you could be 6 feet tall and have a disability. However, that bathroom stall may only really be accessible to them rather than someone who's like 4 feet or, even shorter, confined to a wheelchair. I mean, it's kind of fascinating to see what our government categorizes what's accessible.
Yeah.
Because in reality, like a lot of the things aren't accessible to like the majority of the disabled community.
Interesting. Yeah, we were talking a little bit about that with Kella last week, about how even these very meager accommodations that they are willing to put into practice, people aren't listening to. Houses are still not up to code. Buildings are still not accessible to people, even though they should be.
Yeah, there's when I was working in physical therapy, there's a law within the ADA that the building has to be so many years old for it to require those updates too. So in some cases, unless you demolish the entire building and build from scratch, they're just not going to be ADA approved and accessible.
Which my high school was a great example. I had classes on the 3rd floor, but there was no like safe way. And I was in my wheelchair my second to last year of high school, and there was no way for me to get down to like ground floor safely if we had a fire or.
Wow.
And this was kind of the beginning of like school shootings, bomb threats, all of that stuff. So we had a lot of like bomb threats. So we had like a lot of. Thankfully, like nothing ever happened, so kind of like labeled as drills. And eventually, like some of my friends on the football team were like, "Wait a minute, what do you do?" And I'm like, I just kind of.
Your strategy is just hope.
Yeah, nothing actually goes off.
Hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And they met me at my classroom and like would carry me down the stairs. I mean, because the teachers, like I guess liability, like they couldn't handle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's so much more to get to, and we've got some really exciting calls on the line that I'd like to jump into. But I guess I want to just point out again that that idea of representation of not just like the platonic ideal of a disability, but a spectrum of disability really applies to all different forms of our orientations and gender identity. Because, like, for instance, Hannah Gadsby's got this great bit about watching pride parades growing up as like a very shy lesbian and being like, that if that's gay, then I'm clearly not gay because I don't want to wear a feather boa and be at the front of a parade. And I know for myself in high school, everybody's making fun of me. Everybody's telling me I'm queer and these different things. And I am looking at, men covered in oil and leather and thinking, well, I'm not that, so how can I be queer? And just, whether we're talking about kids or just regular everyday folks, letting people know that there are such a spectrum of people to be. So with that, I do want to go ahead and jump on the line with Alex. We've got a number of great people to talk to, so let's get started. Alex, what can we do for you tonight?
Hi, guys. So, I called it a few times. The long story short, I'm basically asexual, and I don't generally have really much of a desire to really sleep with people or even like kiss people, and I'm sometimes cuddly and huggy and sometimes I'm not. And the past couple days I've been doing some like sexual experimenting with people, and I don't know, I'm kind of apprehensive, I'm kind of curious, and I don't know if there's a way I should approach it so that I can figure out whether I'm doing something and being comfortable with it, or if I'm doing something just because I feel like I should try it.
Yeah, I'll jump in first and then hear from y'all. But I guess the advice that I would give you is that it's okay to be both. It's okay to be a little bit uncomfortable. We certainly wouldn't encourage you to do anything that isn't safe or that you don't want to do. But to feel a little challenged, a little squiggy is okay within a healthy context. And I think the one piece of advice I would give you is to kind of set in your mind an expectation that if you are going to try something new, something that maybe pushes your boundaries a bit, to go into it with an understanding that you can do this again. I often tell people, go ahead and commit if you can to trying something twice. That way, when you get started, you don't feel this obligation to have this incredible once-in-a-lifetime experience, because in a couple of weeks, you're probably going to try again. And it can take some of the pressure off and give you an opportunity to sort of dip your toe in without feeling obligated to get the full experience.
Right. I would piggyback off that for sure and say that wanting to have sex is not limited to being sexually aroused. You don't have to want sex because you're horny. You can want sex because you want to make your partner happy, or because you want to experiment and see what it feels like, or there are any number of good reasons to have sex. It doesn't have to be just that, oh, I feel like I need it for my body tonight. It could be I feel like I just want to see what's going on and give it a try. That's also just as valid, and that also counts as, enthusiastic consent. Just make sure that the other person kind of knows where you're at and knows that this is an experimental thing that you're doing, and maybe to establish a safe word or something if you guys are doing something and you realize you don't like it and don't want to continue. It's always good to have one of those as well.
That's what I was going to say, boundaries and communication. Have a safe word. If something doesn't feel right at any point, you can stop. Just because you agree to something doesn't mean that you have to go through with all of it.
Exactly.
And it's worth just reminding folks that for most situations, your safe word is no.
Yeah.
Stop. Please don't.
I mean, a good one.
Consensual non-consent is wonderful and beautiful and valid, but it's probably not what we're talking about here. So, just letting somebody know, your partner, as you're experimenting, this is an experiment. We're in the laboratory, so have your fire extinguisher ready and know that it's not personal. It's not about you.
Right, yeah. I mean, I've made it clear. And, I was talking to a few of the people, and, the person who I was really getting it on with was, fully aware that I'm not really, I said, I'm not necessarily looking for anything, but I'm down to try things, because I really do like to just kind of put my foot in the water and test things out. And, it's not really something I'm seeking or going out of my way, but it's not something that I would totally turn down. And, it's kind of like, well, I still have my identity and I still don't really experience attraction or like any emotion attached to it. But at the same time, there is there's something that I like about it. And there's something that, I would be fine not doing it again. It's, one of those, I could be either way with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because I don't know a lot of other people who have that kind of feeling about it. And so I don't know if it's that abnormal or if it's that rare or if people just don't talk about that.
I would say that the A of the LGBTQIA, I think about the I and the A all day, every day. I think about how many asexual identified people that don't know that that's a choice, that had sex when they didn't want to. I think about that constantly. There are so many types. There's so much to the binary of just asexuality too.
Yeah.
You're not alone.
That's what I was actually going to ask you. Remind me the word.
Demisexual.
Yes.
But
there's a couple
demisexual,
extra
there's multiple subsections of the A acronym of ACE
Google
folks.
those.
Like all these things we're talking
Amazing.
about, they exist
Yeah.
on a spectrum.
pretty
And you were talking about
enlightening.
the number of asexual folks who had sex when they didn't want to because they didn't know that was a
Yeah.
valid identity, but also the number of asexual folks that have had sex that they enjoyed and wanted, because having sex and liking it does not invalidate your asexual label.
Right. There are sex repulsed asexual people, and then there are people who aren't bothered by it and aren't even interested in it, and that doesn't. You are still valid in your asexuality even if you want to have sex.
Yeah, I think part of it is people conflate like sexual attraction with libido or general like sex drive.
Yeah.
And like I don't really have a high sex drive anyway, and I'm kind of I guess I'm kind of weird because my sex drive fluctuates really without rhyme or reason. Like I'll have days where it's really high, and then I can go weeks without it even crossing my mind or being something I'm interested in. And it doesn't really bother me. Like I know that there are people who I know, and it kind of upsets me that they feel this way. That get concerned about, oh, I'm not feeling horny lately. It's like that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not something you need to worry about. And not to go off too much on a tangent, but I think that doctors push us to like be worried. Oh, if you're not getting a sex drive, there's something horribly wrong with you. When it could just be, there's something perfectly natural going on in your body or your mind that just, we're not confined to, our primal instincts. And that's just how we are. And I have a few things I want to try with people who are receptive to it, and I'm going to figure out a way to go about communicating that with them. But because I've had some people who are telling me that they find me attractive, which that's another thing. I really don't like myself and the way I look, and so I'm like worried about people seeing me like without clothes on, and that could be part of what's going on with me, that I don't really like seek out sexual activity because I don't want people to really see me without anything on, or I don't know. The person that I was with was, pretty like tolerant of, the fact that I don't have a lot of security or that I don't really know what I'm doing. And so it was a, fine experience. And I wasn't like, I don't regret anything, but I don't know. It's like, well, if you try that enough times, something's going to go wrong. And I don't know if I should be thinking about that or kind of just seeing where things take me.
I think that it's very valid to say that your sex drive or your interest in sex has a lot to do with how you see yourself. I used to do burlesque for a few years, and prior to that, I would go to the beach in a jean jacket. Like, there's so much freedom and joy to finding sexy things about yourself, even if it's small increments, like, oh, I really like my wrists or my arm, or like I love my ankles. I love the way I look in a hoodie with no pants. Like, there's so much power to liking even the smallest bit of yourself and kind of discovering that, playing with that. I think you'd be really surprised how it manifests itself in your sexual conquests.
a lot of sense.
Also, just to say, not every sexual experience is going to be amazing either. Like, things are going to go wrong at some point, but that's not you. That's everybody. Everyone has those sexual experiences that they just tell parties to make people awkward, or at least I do. I don't know if other people do. No, but like, yeah, eventually there's going to be an awkward sexual experience in your future if you're pursuing this. But that doesn't reflect on you. That doesn't reflect on your asexuality. That is completely normal. I would be more concerned if there was never any.
It's some of my favorite parts of having sex was all the funny things that happen.
I mean, it definitely makes it easier to have a podcast or a YouTube show.
There you go.
It's true.
Yeah, I find like bare skin on bare skin to some degree a little bit odd, especially if it's large surface areas of like human skin, like just like rubbing up against other areas. It's like, this is not a good feeling for me.
Wait until it makes some noises.
Oh, yeah, that squeakiness.
Yep.
Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of exciting things to explore.
Cheers to that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind trying things, and I'm very open-minded about stuff, and so I think that's going to be like helpful. And one of my friends was telling me that like it's good to kind of know where you're at with this sort of thing, because a lot of people our age don't. I mean, I'm only in my early 20s, and I know a lot of people who are, my age and saying, when I was growing up, I tried all this sort of stuff, and I regret it because I wasn't informed enough about it.
Yeah, I would encourage a sense of curiosity. You talked about knowing these things about yourself, and that's a fine ideal, but I would encourage more of just an exploration of yourself, because the things you think you know will inevitably change, and that's part of the beauty of it. That's, how you make the next 100 years interesting. So we appreciate you calling in again and letting us know you're starting this journey, or at least taking another step in it. I know that I, for one, would love to hear the next chapter. So please feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email and let us know how it goes.
Okay, thank you for taking my call. This has been helpful.
Glad to hear it, and best of luck to you. It might not be great, but I think that even that can be a great time.
Yeah,
so
go
good luck.
fun.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Take care. Yeah, I think in the end, if you want to sing out, sing out. If you want to sing low, sing low. I mean, there's so many different ways to be asexual, to be disabled, to be queer. I mean, I don't want to be cavalier with these labels as if they don't matter, because I know, I know myself, like I have bled and sweat for these adjectives, and they're important to me, but not so important that I pretend to know them. It is a curiosity, and it's an ever-changing thing.
Well, and I think just understanding that it's all fluid.
Yeah.
You know, there's going to be ups and downs in almost every aspect of life, but you don't have to stick to labels, especially with your sexual identity.
Well, we've got a number of great folks, so let's stay on the phones if we can. I'd like to check in with Robert. Robert, what can we do for you tonight?
Hi. Is this the right, this is the atheist station?
Well, technically, yes. The Atheist Experience Network.
Yeah, this is secular sexuality.
Yes, we are not the Atheist Experience or Talk Heathen, but we are atheists, at least two of us.
Yeah.
Don't want to speak for everybody here.
Okay, all right. No, because I was listening to the conversations, and I wasn't sure if I was on the right line.
What can we do for you?
Anyway, I had a question, because I subscribed to one of the YouTube videos called Lao Huai, I think it's 86. And this is a man who lived in Chinese American and lived there for many years. And he was saying about one thing that really changed him about being in China was two things that he saw that it really kind of horrified him. One of them was a man that was dead in the street, and people were just standing around laughing, looking and pointing and laughing. And another time in another part of China, somebody got in an accident, was killed, and again, people just sort of laughed and looked. And And so one of the comments at the bottom was, this is because China is an atheistic society.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't believe that, but I just wondered how you might react to that or how you might answer that comment.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. China is used very often in kind of a very problematic way as, oh, the bad atheist country.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of countries that are secular and thriving, and there are some countries that are secular and not thriving. And there are theistic countries that are doing okay, and theistic countries that are really not doing okay. I would say that the equivocation between a theist country doing bad things because they are justified by their belief system and people in a country that is secular doing things that are not great just as a thing that they do is problematic, because nobody is laughing at a dead person in the street. As horrible as that is, no one's doing it because atheism told them to do it.
Right, but I think his point was there was no moral code, or I guess he feels that religion somehow gives you a moral code, teaches you how to behave and how to react. I think that's what his point was.
Well, that's also very problematic for a whole other set of reasons.
It's certainly a point that's been made again and again and again that atheists are somehow without a moral code. And I, first of all, don't see any evidence of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you have to start there. I'm hearing from you who heard from a YouTube video where a guy told a story about a thing that happened on another continent, and I'm not necessarily doubting the veracity of that story, but I can't say that I'm compelled or convinced in any way that this atheist country, which is already a problematic concept, because I don't know that you can really describe a nation that way, especially one with such oppressive forces and access to media and these different things.
Right.
But setting all of that aside, this idea that something bad happened somewhere, therefore atheism, no morality, is just not held up by all of the great, fine, and wonderful atheists that I know.
Right, and also, I mean, we can, I don't want to on this show, but we can get into the evolutionary and psychological benefits of having a naturalistic basis for your moral compass, and the concept of maximizing well-being and the concept of evolving as a social species. There are many conversations and many routes that we can go down to debunk that particular claim.
Right. Well, I don't believe in God. I'm actually a Buddhist. And Buddhists are atheists, don't believe in souls, don't believe in God. So I always feel that if you want to do something good because you're afraid you're going to be punished when you die, that's not as moral as you want to do something good because you want to help other people.
Right. There are also, there are those ways to combat that claim. Well, okay, well, what is your morality and where are you getting it from? And it is also as subjective as they claim that secular morality is, because if it wasn't their God saying it, it'd be some other God saying it. And I think that trying to debunk somebody's claim without them present is tricky. We can extrapolate what we think he might have meant, and certainly go down those rabbit trails. But I think in general, claiming that people are bad because they're atheists is a lazy argument. It's lazy. You can do better.
Yeah, okay.
So I hope that gives you something of an overview. Like you said, this is sort of a rabbit trail that, the deontology of this can be dissected endlessly and has been and continues to be. Thank you for joining the Atheist Experience Network, where we do that very thing.
Right.
Yeah, by all means, call back on Sunday at 1 p.m. and talk to us on Talk Heathen, and then we can get into all of the specifics about this.
Right, because I don't believe that for a moment either. I just wondered how to respond to that.
Oh, for sure.
And I was thinking about it, and the atheists that I know are all very moral. So, more moral than theists in a lot of ways.
No, I think it's fair to say. I mean, at the very least, I think somebody who is out as an atheist has thought over that question and has been willing to pay something of a social cost in order to take on a label, which does not automatically make you a good person. It does, however, mean that you have likely examined your morality in some ways that many theists who simply adopt their parents' religion in a careless and casual way likely haven't. So, again, I don't want to over extrapolate or generalize all of this too much, but I hope that gives you at least a framework or a place to start as you're kind of pondering these issues.
Well, I actually wasn't pondering them because I didn't believe it. I just didn't know quite how to. It was just a comment at the bottom of the video. The guy who did the video didn't say that.
Right.
He didn't have that idea at all. It was just a comment, and I was thinking of that comment. And, I guess I know in some ways China was very moralistic, at least back in the day when all your books were about what to do if you find money on the floor. You have to go and find the person who lost it and not keep it, and things like that. They had a lot of lessons like that.
Oh, to claim that one culture has the monopoly on morality is ludicrous.
Or to even try and run an entire nation through, some like Kohlberg's ideals of what morality should be or these types of things. It just doesn't get anywhere. And I guess on a human level, if your question is how to respond to that comment, I'd say don't, because it's a lazy YouTube comment from a random person.
They're baiting you.
That's really not going to be a good use of your life, at least from my point of view.
Yeah, good use of your time. That's not.
No, I don't like to respond to questions that could, argue points that are important on YouTube or online in general.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
But good on you for giving this some thought and calling in and trying to find the answers to it. That's the most you can do. Good job.
Thanks.
Okay. You're welcome. Okay, have a good night.
Absolutely.
You as well.
Take care.
It's interesting to me that people always pick on certain countries. When I was in London, which is, granted, it's very secular, but still technically a Christian nation, I was in London, and there were so many people who would jump in front of the tube. Every single day, there were people who would just jump in front of the tube. And at one point, I just got
to clarify, you're describing suicide by jumping in front of a subway car,
or at least attempted. I don't know.
Suicide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And there are people in that trolley car who probably go to church on Sundays, who when it's explained, sorry, we're stopping, we're late because somebody is on the tracks, they just go, oh, and check their watch and be annoyed. And it was shocking to me that I was like, oh my gosh. But I'm not that doesn't ever come up. It's always, oh, those people in this other country. That's, I don't know. I think it's
sufficiently different
in
order to be.
I think the code is non-Christian, isn't it, though?
Because
Christian is the default. I mean, I love that joke of who won? It's Christians won. What year is it? You know what I mean?
Fair point. Well, with that, let's take one more call before we get back into talking about your show. Let's speak with Shalev. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Great. Glad to hear from you.
Okay. It's a difficult name. It's okay. But basically, I wanted to talk about it's basically just my own experience with, are you familiar with what cleansing stream is?
No, I haven't heard that term.
No.
Okay, so it's mostly used in evangelical Christian circles, and my church was very big into it when I was growing up. And it's basically just demonic deliverance, but it's all written out, and they have a nice binder for it, so it's nice packaging.
A binder for demonic deliverance.
Oh yeah, they have a binder.
Way too organized for the evangelicals I grew up with.
That's gotta sell it.
Wow. Okay.
I know. So they're well prepared, and it's supposed to be that you have two people who they've been designated somehow, they've gone through some training, and now they can do this. So you go meet with them, and then they go through this binder, and whatever it is in your life that you need demonic deliverance of, they have a certain phrase that apparently is magical, and that's going to, get rid of it.
As one does.
Okay.
Yeah. So since I'm bisexual, obviously they would not call it bisexuality; they would call it same-sex attraction.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the demonic deliverance of same-sex attraction, which I think they had in a whole list of other things, along with witchcraft, where it's basically a manifestation of sinful flesh or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, because all sexual desire is basically evil, except, and even in this narrow context, it's still kind of evil, right? So that certainly makes sense.
Mm. So I had that whole thing where, and also my epilepsy gets thrown in with it because obviously that has demonic influences as well.
Right.
So through this whole binder experience, so I didn't quite figure out that I was bisexual until like much later in like my mid-20s because I thought I was just dealing with this demonic thing where it wasn't that I was bisexual because I liked men and women. It was, oh, I'm actually straight, but I just have this demonic thing that's attached to me that I kind of have to get rid of.
Yep. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. So I've heard of like people who are gay talking about this whole cleansing stream thing, but I've never heard anyone who's like bisexual and has gone through that experience, or pansexual, whoever you want to identify with. But
Interesting. So did they think it was like maybe like a low grade demonic possession as opposed to like full gay? They're like, okay, it doesn't have all of its hooks in you.
Basically, they tried to compliment me that I was a very strong Christian.
Okay.
I am now an atheist. But at the time, I was apparently a very strong Christian, so it only has a mild influence. And it's likely that one of my ancestors had done something and this
generational
passed
sin.
along and then got passed down.
Oh, I wonder what that thing was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
But the thing is how witchcraft is
I'd
in
watch
the
that
list.
porn channel.
Right?
Like, what did your ancestor do to make you
Generational
gay?
sin.
Yeah,
Ooh.
I'd watch it.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you said witchcraft was also
Yeah.
woven
so
in
maybe
there.
Who knows? Maybe they did witchcraft and that made me bi. Who knows?
Oh my gosh.
Well, and I think you're bringing up a really important point that not to suggest by any means that it is easier to be gay and oppressed and going through conversion therapy and these different experiences that we see highlighted, but it's an altogether different experience to have a more flexible sexuality and to be told that 50% of it or some portion of it is wrong. And to be able to pass, to be able to live that stereotypical heteronormative lifestyle and just be sort of cut off from these aspects of yourself rather than, having to be completely asexual or completely cut off from your sexuality to instead manage it in that awkward way.
Yeah, I was just listening to a podcast about this today, actually, Confidently Insecure with Kelsey Darrow. She was interviewing Gabby Dunn, both of whom you should look up if you're bi, because they are bicons and awesome. Yeah, they were talking about the different kinds of kind of issues that you face when you're bi, because there is that level of passing that happens. So then you are around other people who will say things in your presence, not realizing that they are flat out insulting you. And then you have to go like, am I safe enough to combat this now? Should I be quiet and then feel guilty later? Like it is its own set of struggles for sure.
Yeah, biphobia stretches beyond religion, beyond straight, beyond gay. When you ride that middle line to people, they don't know. You're not in any box that they can point at and say, I know what this is.
I have people who think that I'm just straight and dealing with my own demons, and then I have people who think that I'm just gay and I haven't quite figured it out.
Comes from both sides, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's the real meaning of bi.
Yes.
Don't stop coming and don't stop coming. Don't stop coming.
Yeah, I feel ya.
Yeah, but it's basically the main thing that I've noticed with a lot of hearing other people who are bi and hearing their stories, the main thing is a lot of confusion.
Mm-hmm.
We're just trying to figure it out because while you have attractions for your same gender, you also have attractions for the opposite gender. So then it becomes confusing.
Yeah, you're able to write it off to a certain extent and say, oh, I was just in a weird mood, or Satan was really moving that day.
Something was moving that day.
I had a girlfriend in high school, so I was definitely...
Answered that question fairly early on. Well, congratulations there.
Oh yeah, no, I remember bisexuality wasn't even talked about in my family. The only time anybody ever mentioned bisexuality, my mom said, "And bisexual people are just greedy." It's the only time I've ever heard.
I couldn't be bisexual because bisexuals are sluts.
Yep, yep, that is
that's a
heard that
common
one.
one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, we're just hitting all of the intersections today, and I'm so glad to do it on this particular day while you're here.
Yeah, this is really good.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story,
Thanks for
Chef.
calling.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Take care. Before we go any farther, I have to take a moment and just call back. Did you use the word bicon?
Bicon.
Because I did not know that was a turn of phrase, and I love it.
I also was like pinning.
Yeah, coming back to that.
Coming back to that. Mhm.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, it is. It's a thing.
All right, Googling that later.
In case anybody needed a new search term or tag to use.
Right, there you go.
Go ahead and throw that on the Instagrams. Okay. Well, yeah, back to our conversation. So I am queer. The OI coming from osteogenesis imperfecta.
Nailed it.
Yes, so proud every
Again.
time. We talked about the disability aspect and the intersection of all that, but I'd like to spend a little bit of time just sort of acknowledging the word queer. I mean, we've already talked about acronyms tonight and about the internet, about how even on this show and our really wonderful audience. Certainly, we have some trolls, but we've got some really great folks that want to speak up about representation, which I so appreciate. But there's not really a singular answer about should we be saying LGBTQIA++? Should we be using GSR? These different acronyms and terms. And, working out in the community, I feel like queer has become generally accepted, but it's still really challenging for a lot of people. So what was it like to literally put that on your logo, to take that mantle on?
Well, we talked a little bit about this, what that word meant to you growing up. To me, it was absolutely an insult. And with New England accents being the way they were, it was queer.
Yeah.
And it wasn't queer with a hard R, anything like that. So, in this idea of it becoming an umbrella term to encapsulate any acronym that comes underneath it, it really depends on the individual. And same with disability and visibility and queerness and gayness. It's up to that individual. You ask that person, what that means to them, and if that's. I know a lot of people, a lot of gay people that would be very offended if I called them queer.
Sure.
Yeah.
We met a wonderful neighbor of ours who was just and just kept saying dykes casually about other people, and I know that's an identifier to dykes out there. It's just not something I heard so freely thrown around growing up, with queer being being the insult, being the topic.
Yeah, I think for me, coming to terms with my sexuality and going through that that journey, it is, all of it's a journey. But for me, it was I dated men, I was attracted to men, but I was also attracted to women. And then I had a couple of friends that were transitioning, and then that was a whole other category that I learned. And I just kind of was how do you encompass my attraction to everyone? But at the same time, I'm fluid. And for me, the word queer just kind of encompasses the fluidity of myself and also my attractions. And, I understand that some people don't like to use that word as identifier. honestly that it doesn't matter to me what people use to identify. At the end of the day, the podcast is our podcast. And
That's a fair point.
And for us, when we were developing, we spent a couple months before we even like started recording, because we wanted the title of the podcast to also reflect our logo. And if you look at our logo, it's if you Google it, it's like inclusive rainbow. So it has like the general rainbow colors, but it also has like the trans and then also black and brown on there. And that was our approach to really hold ourselves accountable. Like, yes, we're talking from our perspective, but we really are trying to invite everyone to the table.
Well, and we're trying to deconstruct, gender as well, because if you take gender out of the equation, sexuality means nothing. Like, if gender's fluid, I could be straight, being attracted to a person that identifies as a man, and then I could be, it depends on how I identify that day.
Right.
It's all relative, because we're so obsessed with gender, with genitals, and putting people in places that with which we're familiar, this binary. The sexuality stuff comes afterwards, because we're getting into semantics about what we are as people, right? And that's kind of what we love about that word queer, is it's gender and it's sexuality.
Yeah.
It's otherness, it's strangeness, it's this fear on both sides of the spectrum, on all sides rather. That it's just something to talk about. Everybody has feelings about it in some way.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I use it as when I don't want to get into all of the specifics.
Sure.
For people who
Yeah.
I trust, people who I know are in the same kind of community, I'm a non-binary, demi-bi, very gay femboy. That's that. I'm not saying that to anybody who I don't know or trust, except for everybody who's on the internet now, apparently. It's queer, because that encompasses everything. But yeah, I've gotten pushback from people in the community who are like, don't use that word. I won't use it for you. Never use it for somebody who has not explicitly identified as that thing, because it is a very still kind of volatile term. But I'm using it again, even for the political angle.
Yeah, and I think we're grabbing words left and right to use, like, to empower ourselves that haven't always been empowering. Because I do think moving forward, as generationally speaking, we're focused more on empowerment rather than
Reclaiming what was a slur.
Exactly.
And I know it still is for many people,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's power in taking that back. But I also appreciate the fact that it is sort of our, like, catch-all filler word in a lot of ways. I mean, when we talk about genderqueer in particular, it's just sort of a like placeholder until we get more language, because we are every day adding new words. And I can appreciate why people might feel overwhelmed or exhausted by that process. But the reality is we haven't been having these conversations for very long. So I'm very curious to see in 10 years, as words like non-binary, like whether it's NB or whatever other term we might be using come into play, if that word will drop out, or if we're always going to have a need for queer.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a valid question. I also think that's debatable, like, depending on what community you're in.
Yeah, I'm sure that's very relative to like specific pockets of the world.
Yeah, because I would say, like, within my, like, closer friend group, like, we use queer all the time. And honestly, I don't second guess using it. I really don't. Like, I don't get pushback with people with using the word queer from my experience. So honestly, I find it a little surprising that both of you have recently.
It certainly comes
enough,
up.
enough to where it's like concerning. And I think that's where I'm like, interesting, because, and maybe this is like a generational thing.
I think so.
But I think that even, like, if it is a generational thing, like, that makes me really want to kind of think about that, because why do people feel like that's a bad word? Was it because someone used it to them that way? Like, is it connected to a personal like experience? And if it is, like, I would encourage people to like really break that down, because essentially, and maybe this is a little bold of me, but if that's something that's like a personal experience to you, to where that word is negative, and then you're telling people like don't use that word at all, that's a little projective, like as far as but I mean, at the same time, like, you can control obviously like your environment and the words that people use for you, but to say like don't use that word,
Be
it's like
prescriptive in that way.
yeah, it's like for anyone or for generally speaking, because I think it's okay to be uncomfortable if it's to the point where like it's a mental health thing or even like emotional anxiety. Obviously take care of yourself, but at the same time, it took me a minute to just say I'm gay. You know, like if I really like had to track back like all of these descriptor words, at some point in my life, I felt very uncomfortable saying gay or bi or lesbian. Even mentioning Brokeback Mountain, I think just made me very uncomfortable at some point. But, you know, fast forward a couple of years later, and I've definitely have leaned into all of that. So I think it's like, it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to use these words, even if you're still in the process of like changing how this word like means to you. But also that's just me just like wanted to push people a little bit.
Well, I think it's not just the word queer. I think that's something I've seen inside of the queer community a lot, is who can call themselves bi, who can call themselves pan. Do we need bi? Do we need pan? Or who can call themselves trans? Can non-binary people call themselves trans? Can people without gender dysphoria call themselves trans? Like, all of these prescriptivism concepts of like, I am the arbiter of this language, and I get to decide who gets to be called what. And I'm curious where that comes from.
Well, I'm excited to be tearing down the gatekeeping and to be, critical and challenging these things. But I also just want to really recognize that folks who live in the margins are trying to form community, trying to prop themselves up in any way that they can. And when you have been told that what you are is wrong for so long, when you've been challenged and oppressed in so many ways, to have somebody take on that label that doesn't necessarily match your experience or your circumstances can feel as if it's cheapening what you've gone through. And I absolutely respect that hurt and that challenge. And, I would certainly encourage people to have a big tent, to be excited and cheering on Gen Z and their relatively easy access to this verbiage, and to invite them into this new culture that is far from perfect, but that is going to be so much more accepting and welcoming of their identities than even us. I mean, everybody at this table is of a rather young age, relatively speaking, and we've had challenges that they won't.
Yeah.
And that should be an exciting
and that goes
thing.
back further, too.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where the rub is.
Yeah.
There's what it symbolizes, what queer symbolizes to the previous generations. Like, we don't know. We don't know what that suffering was like, right? So it's like, oh, and now everybody's welcome. And I think, to me, with the elder lesbians in my family have brushed off queer for that very reason. Well, now everybody can be queer. You don't know what it was like, like to be a dyke suffering,
even the fact that I don't know that I've ever heard the phrase elder lesbian before, which, it's a lovely turn of phrase, but it's also
they don't
curious.
identify as queer. That's the only reason I use lesbian.
Well, sure, and I respect that, but
Elder lesbian sounds like a dragon thing. Elder
right?
Dragons. Yeah, I like it.
Just the fact that we don't use that word, that hasn't come up before.
Exactly.
That it's only now, and I don't want to dismiss people for generations and generations that have been lesbian, or even the rare instances where they've had the opportunity to be out, but to recognize that culturally, the concept of having somebody of a certain age, of an elder age, who identifies as lesbian and has been out their whole life is a relatively new thing for us to be grappling with as a society.
Yeah, true.
Well, and so 2 things I want to just kind of expand on is, one, if we fast forward 10 years down the road and we're equally as pissy about more acronyms or more genders, and we're just like, well, we worked hard for just our people. Like, y'all have X, Y, and Z. Essentially, I'm trying to explain what we're talking about. But the point, what I'm trying to say is, if we're holding each other accountable now, like saying, hey, we're all fighting for equal rights, and if we get those equal rights, we should be happy. Like, we all collectively worked hard for X, Y, and Z. Yeah. I feel when certain individuals hold on to those rights and like, no, I only fought this for myself or for my friends or for my community. Well, point blank, I, as a person of what I call the queer community, I would say, well, then you just made it very clear that you did not fight for me, which that I think is problematic because, again, you're breaking apart the community. But then 2, if that's like what we're doing, then what community do we really have? And then it goes into kind of what we were talking about earlier with the person who's bi, like, gets it from both sides. Like, you get this homophobia within the straight community, and then you also get it within the queer community.
Right.
And so for me, I would just kind of like chop this up a little, for me, like in a simple way, to go like, okay, if you're not willing to participate in this community, regardless of who identifies with what, then maybe this isn't your community. And that, I think, can be very hard to say. But at the same time, how do we have those conversations and go, you know what, I understand that you worked really hard, but maybe if you come and hang out with us, you'll understand we're really not that much different than the friends or the people you grew up with.
Right.
It's just different words. I mean, even elderly queer folks might not understand what they and them is. And that's something I've encountered where there's like, that's a new one. How do I do it? And I'm like, and it's the same conversation I would have with anyone else. But I think it's one of those things where we have to kind of hit the pause button and do a little self-reflection of like, did you really fight for the community, or was it just like your community? Because those can be 2 very different things.
That's a good
Absolutely.
question.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's
All right.
Just saying.
everyone listens. Well, it seems like as good a time as any to take a moment to just thank everybody who's been calling in, but especially the folks who have been calling the Ask line. That's our 512-666-0ASK. That's our voicemail box where people can call in at any point during the week, leave us a message that we can listen to on the show. I want to let you know that we hear you. We are getting your messages, and we're so grateful for them. We are saving them up and storing them like dragons for when the cold winter months come, as the holidays are going to be here and we won't always have a live episode. So I do want to let you know we're getting your emails, we're getting your voicemails, and we're so appreciative. And we'd love to keep them coming. You know, as this coming week, if you are listening to this podcast at the airport, as you're flying to see family, as you're driving down the road, if you are stressing out about what mom is going to say, about what Uncle Larry is going to talk about at dinner, please keep us in mind. We would love to be part of your community. We'd love to invite you into this atheist community of Austin and this secular sexuality corner of it. So please keep those messages coming. With that, I'd like to also go ahead and play a voicemail that we got from our good friend Johnny at Forbidden Fruit.
Hello, you sexuality folks. This is Johnny with Forbidden Fruit. I wanted to call and bring up the topic of the happy sadist. Now, not Satanist, But the people who actually get joy out of, hurting other people. And as a kink provider and a kink source here at Forbidden Fruit, I just wanted to see if you guys had any tips or tricks for folks who want to approach the subject of pain and pleasure in a way that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad person. You're just kinky, and that is absolutely all right. All right, y'all. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Boy,
That was great.
Yeah. Johnny's great, right?
Oh
right.
My God.
Yeah, if you aren't familiar with Forbidden Fruit, we definitely recommend you check out their store and their website, forbiddenfruit.com. But they have also sent a number of different folks who have been on the show. Check out our back catalog. We've had a couple of interviews with Andy as well as with Johnny and some other great folks, Megan as well.
Homemade BDSM toys. It's fun.
Yeah, some good stuff. But this is a question that I feel like a lot of people grapple with, and that keeps people who might themselves be kinky from joining the kink community or even just jumping in, because how can you love somebody and want to see their ass red and bruised? It is a difficult dissonance for a lot of people to hold, but, I would say that on some level, we all do this. I mean, we all, whether we're actively cheering for, Walter White or Tyrion or, any of these fictional characters or not, we've all seen movies where we enjoy the bad guy in some way. We've all, grew up playing cops and robbers. And, as Dan Savage likes to say, that's all kink and BDSM is cops and robbers with no pants on.
Mm-hmm.
So just wrapping your mind around that a little bit. Yeah.
Or also, have you ever, seen a puppy so cute you wanted to squish it?
Cute aggression is real.
Yeah, it's a thing.
It's a loss of control.
Yeah, I'm going to need y'all to keep going
There's
with that
a
because
study.
I do not relate to that concept at all. But I
So
think
there's a
it's
study that was
fascinating.
done on cute aggression
Yeah.
where people, where you were shown pictures of neutral images and cute images, and they had bubble wrap the subjects, and disproportionately they would pop when there was something cute. It's a loss of control that you feel. I have to remind myself constantly. I would pinch and hit and stuff like that. We have a friend that talks about this often. Every time it comes up, she's like, "It's real. I killed a kitten once." Oh my God. It's
a true story.
It's a loss of control, and you love something so much you just want to kill it.
I hear people talk about I just want to squish his face.
Yeah.
And I hear
Bite.
those phrases, and I've always just kind of assumed that it was just a meme I didn't get.
Hyperbole? No, it's real.
This is this is an emotion
real.
that I guess some portion of this table experiences.
We had a talk after a year of dating, and I was like, all right, this was cute, you poking my face and doing stuff when I would just gradually just walk past, and it would be I'm like, stop, it's enough. But it was 100% cute aggression because you still have the urge to do it, but I give you this look and you're like,
which is kind of cute.
Reading the room.
Right.
Reading the room.
I think that there's a lot to be said just for the connections in our brains between those two things.
Yeah.
And they're not opposite sides of the coin. They're or maybe that is the phrase, opposite sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
They are. Never mind, they are. But yeah, they're not completely different things. That they are very intimately connected, even psychologically and neurologically.
And recognizing that these so-called bad emotions, anger, sorrow, these different things have value, and that they are part of ourselves. And certainly we want to manage them in these healthy ways. And I don't necessarily think of kink, actually I would say solidly, I don't think of kink exclusively as a way of getting your anger out or something like that. I do think that it can be that for some people, and it can be so in a healthy way. But even besides all of that, these desires are okay. You know, wanting to shame and humiliate your female partner doesn't make you a misogynist. It doesn't mean that you aren't a feminist. Wanting to be violent doesn't mean you're not a pacifist. Again, these labels and identities are more malleable and fluid than we maybe use them sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There's to get not too woo-y, there's the concept of the shadow self.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just the concept of there are, ideally, the bedroom or wherever it is that you're having sex, this kinky sadist sex.
The bedroom, the dungeon, the park bench.
Wherever. As long as everybody around you has consented to watch you.
Right, sure.
Ideally, this would be a space where you are free to explore that other side of yourself and to go places maybe you wouldn't else otherwise. And as long as everybody in that room is okay with that and you are being aware of who is consenting and who is enthusiastic about this and when you should lay off, there is no moral judgment there. It's an amoral situation. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing that you're doing.
I think that's fair to say. Well, we have just a few minutes left, but I guess I wanted to talk a little bit more about what it means to be taking on this podcast and taking on in a very public way that queer identity. I mean, what are some of the challenges of being non-binary? It's obviously not just about, arguing over pronouns.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, I hear the question, but at the same time, I don't hear the question because I was born with a disability, and I feel like how I'm approaching the podcast is, like, this is me. Like,
sure.
There is, like, no what ifs, ands, or buts. Frankly, like, whatever feedback we get, we will listen and we'll absorb and we'll apply, as needed. But I think, like, the message I would essentially tell anyone at the end of the day, live your life for you. It is so hard to, like, live your life for other people. There's absolutely nothing I can change about my disability as much as people think or want there to be, like, a cure. There's not one. And kind of the same way, like, with my gender or sexuality, like, you can want whatever you want at the end of the day, but nothing's changing. My gender might change and my interests in, like, sexualities might change, but at the end of the day, like, it's not going to be this cookie cutter thing. Like,
and it doesn't change because you wished it.
Yeah. Like, it's just,
like, there is some fluidity, but that fluidity is perhaps only vaguely around the edges, malleable by will.
And to kind of speak for both of us, I think this podcast is a way for us to show people, like, this is who we are, like, our authentic selves. And if people have a problem with the word queer, at the end of the day, am I harming anything or anyone by using the word? I don't think so. And I mean, I think that's where I think, for me, where I would change, like, gears drastically is, like, if I was, like, harming or hurting someone. And I don't think we are. And so it's, I find the podcast empowering. I would hope other people do too. I don't think, like, we've changed, like, our relationships or viewpoints because of the podcast. I think it's a really good representation of, like, who we are.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the binary and being genderqueer and non-binary, we're two very different looking and acting people who both don't identify as male or female, you know. And I think that variety is also really important too, to provide like, listen, we're both gender queer folks. One may look more gender queer than the other, and we just get into just the most amazingly fun kerfluffles because of it. But you know, it never stops, you know, and as long as we are all brainwashed in terms of what is feminine, what is masculine, flowers, makeup, hair, boobs, as long as we're thinking like that, there's always gonna be people that skirt the outs or right in between, or in between the margins, or everything like that. So just having that variety and having that space to talk about, you know, just with ourselves. You had to remind me that there's more people like me out there.
Yeah, and that's something like we've talked about, is like we are putting ourselves in a vulnerable position where people could really just come at us at all different angles. But I think this is something that we really like made sure we as a couple understood, as individuals, and we were ready for anything. Like, I've already had someone, a part of the OI community, tell me I wasn't OI enough. I wasn't disabled enough. And that was the one thing I knew could get to me above all the else. But I was I legit prepared myself. Like, we had a conversation. I knew it was coming. I didn't know from whom or how soon or how, like, but I knew, because that was something I've experienced already in my life, regardless if the podcast was going to happen or not.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like where my mind is like, the podcast really didn't, it just created a platform for us to have these conversations with people that were willing to have them. Like, we're not forcing anyone to listen to us. You know, it's like everything that our platform provides is like, you tune in to listen. And so it's kind of like, well, if you don't like what I'm posting on my Facebook, don't follow. You know, it's that kind of mentality.
Sure, opt in, opt out.
We absolutely want to call people into this, but at the same time, I don't think I'm gonna like beat myself up over it, because frankly, at the end of the day, like, the world does that enough.
Sure.
And I think this is to just kind of create a platform for people to feel comfortable, and for us to really lean into like who we are, and kind of explore that in a public way, but also
to find community. You really want to find community too.
Yeah, because we have an awesome, queer community, but there are so many able-bodied folks, and I feel that there's like a whole part of me that gets overlooked sometimes. So it's, I think that's why unapologetically I'm just like, this is it. Like, it's like, this is me, and I've had to fight for myself and for my relationships my entire life. So it's like, yeah, the internet is a scary place, but at the same time, I feel really good about it.
Nice.
You know, we've talked about this in different angles and come at it from different ways. You know, we mentioned this idea of bisexuality being kind of pushed upon by both sides and all of that. And with that being the case, what has your experience been having such different gender presentations while still using similar pronouns, similar self-descriptors? I mean, do you have experiences where, you know, you're not queer enough, or where you're not feminine enough, or where there's just not the expected label, and then to enter that as a couple, as a unit by a certain degree?
I would say that there's been a lot of expectations put upon us. We've had some really interesting exchanges, and I would say it's not just because I'm more femme presenting and you're more androgynous. Our height, our closeness, our constant nearness of each other. People have thought I was your mother. They have thought.
Yeah, no, this is true. I think it's our.
People want to ask me. They think I am your talking point, your aide. I don't know what, but so many people bypass me and are just like, "What's the deal with your friend here?" You know, and it's just this. And sometimes you'll get it first, but I'll be right there. We're both we have to practice we were talking about practicing comebacks to people, like, oh, you got to get out more if we're the weirdest things you've seen. You have to prepare yourself for that that pushback, that adversity that could just be walking down the street going, hey, you're weird.
Yeah, because it's so interesting. I'll walk into places or scenarios and go, oh, they're absolutely going to have an issue with, like, my mullet. Mm-hmm. But then I get there and they're like, you're really short. And I'm like, well, duh. Like, and I have to take a moment where I'm like, oh, okay, you are those people. You're not, like, what I was anticipating. But it's always something. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, we try to prepare ourselves so we're not so caught off guard. But at the same time, like, it seriously just comes out of nowhere where people are like, you're this or you're that or you're not this and you're not that. And it's like, why are you talking to me? Mm-hmm. We were coming back on a road trip back from New York, and I think we're somewhere in Tennessee or something, and we stopped at a rest stop. I went, and again, we're using the restroom, which is always kind of a, well, we'll see how this goes kind of situation.
Yeah.
And I was tight. We had a bag, like, on the top of our car, and we had a bike rack with 2 bikes, and we have a Honda Fit, so it looked like a lot. And we were just tightening the straps on the bike rack, or just checking. They were fine, but we were just checking them. And someone comes up and was like, how do you see? And I just went, oh, well, there's like enough window room, like the bikes don't block the whole view. And she looked at me and she goes, no, like, you're so short. And I went, oh, okay. And I just went, you're one of those people, is like what I said to her. And I just, like, started getting in the car, and she's like, no, but, like, I'm some average.
She goes, I mean, I'm 5'1", so.
Yeah, and I was just like,
cool flex.
That's cool. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Average height.
That's so weird, because you had just had a really nice experience in the bathroom too.
It's like so strange.
You never know. Some people are just chill.
No, if people are gonna have, like, an issue with, like, or not even an issue with my height, it's just shocking, And I'm like, I see people my height or, like, a little taller than me all the time. It's like, why? What? But then it's like, or it's an issue with, like, or, like, yesterday I had someone go, all right, like, I was at lunch and they're like, all right, ma'am, sir, what do you want? Just what do you want? And it was like, that's all you really got to say is, like, what do you want to eat? Like, you don't have to address anyone, but it's...
You don't have to stop what you're doing.
It's your majesty.
Yes, thank you.
I might use that.
Your highness. Mm-hmm. I just always, when in terms of that non-binariness, like, what to do, like, I them to death. Like, just you, she, Lex, I'll them until you go, wait, who's them? Like, them.
It's me.
It's like, well, what? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
People pick up. I'm so surprised how often people just naturally pick up on it. Mm-hmm. It's too exhausting to correct people sometimes. And you're just like, I'm going to do my thing.
Oh, that's another thing is, like, let me get my words. So the emotional labor on people and having to, like, constantly, like, give people the benefit of the doubt or be like, oh, you know what, lady, it's okay. I can't actually see. I'm fine. Like, I was just like, oh, you're one of those people. Cool, bye. Like, I don't have, nor do I want to have the mental capacity for you because.
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
Don't argue with every YouTube comment you see.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't read them.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't even read them.
Yeah. You don't have to read them.
Don't even read them.
Okay. You know what they're going to say.
And I think that's why I would just always encourage people to be your authentic self unapologetically.
Yeah.
Words.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a beautiful message to go out on. I want to make sure people know where to find you. I know I'm a listener on iTunes. Where are y'all at?
You can stream and listen to our episodes on Anchor, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts,
pretty much any like,
everywhere fine podcasts are podcasted.
You should. And our website www.oimqueer.com also has a list of where you can listen. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and you can also rate us. There's also a really cool feature on Anchor where you can do a video message which is neat.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. And if you don't want to do a video message, you can do an audio message. And kind of similar to this setup, we'll play it on the episode. So
We're also on Instagram.
yeah, Instagram at I Am Queer. We also have a Facebook page. We're probably gonna gear to posting an episode monthly for this month, and then December, and then go back to weekly episodes in January because holidays.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I guess I'll let everybody know that we are going to be having episodes every week, like real podcasters, like real YouTubers, throughout November and December. So please, if your family is at all like mine, we will be here at 7 o'clock on Thursday if you'd like to tune in and join us. In the meantime, please keep those emails and voicemails and we don't get good mail on this show. We come into the studio every once in a while and see just very strange things that get mailed into some of the other shows, and I guess I'm just jealous.
Send us things.
Send us weird things. We did have somebody send a box. Yeah, we did have somebody send in a giant box of condoms, and they didn't specify what show it was for, but I'm taking credit.
I mean, it's either this or the Atheist Experience, one or the other.
I don't know why it would be the Atheist Experience, but I like to imagine maybe it's Parenting Beyond Belief, for all I know.
Oh my gosh. Or not Parenting Beyond Belief.
Because every sperm is sacred.
Every sperm is special.
Oh my gosh.
Is good.
We're also on Twitter at Secular Sex. We posted the most popular tweet that we've gotten so far was about Chick-fil-A. So go and weigh in on that tweet, or just
please let us know your thoughts.
And then again, we are going to be pre-recording a couple of the holiday podcasts, and so we're going to be relying on those voicemails. So make sure that you call us at our voicemail number 512-666-0ASK. That's 512-666-0275.
And what was that thing that y'all were saying about liking and subscribing? Yeah, please do that.
Leave a review.
Leave a review. Leave a comment. Just get engaged. We've spent tonight talking about the importance of community, and as members of the atheist community of Austin, as part of the Atheist Experience Network, we just want to be that community, and we hope that you'll join us on Facebook, on Discord, on Twitter, on these wonderful places, because we really appreciate being a part of your world. So thank you again so much for joining us. Keep the conversation going, and I suppose in the meantime, go and give yourself a big ol' orgasm, or better yet, give somebody else one.
Crew cam! And TARDIS.
Look at the TARDIS. It's so cute.
It's bigger on the inside.
That was awesome.
Squish it.
This is gonna fucking demolish it.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.